I'm here at Bletchley Park, affectionately known as the home of the codebreakers during the Second World War. When we think of Bletchley, we tend to think of men like Alan Turing, very clever mathematicians and codebreakers who worked hard throughout the Second World War to break into Germany's Enigma ciphers. It's certainly true that men like Alan Turing were here and that they did do that work, that very, very important and clever work. But there were also around 10,000 other people working here during the Second World War, and 3/4 of them were women. Among those women were hundreds of members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force.
So what exactly were the WAAF doing at Bletchley? Well, over the course of the war, they worked here in what's known as signals intelligence. Signals intelligence, or SIGINT as it's sometimes known, involves intercepting enemy signals and reading their contents. The increased use of technology, particularly radio, meant that millions of messages were transmitted during the war on both sides, and these could be plucked from the air, broken into and read. SIGINT was very valuable intelligence because it came directly from the enemy. In January 1945, there were 1,096 WAAF working at Bletchley and its outstations, and many of these women were involved in the collection, analysis and dissemination of signals intelligence relating to Luftwaffe operations.
Often the WAAF who were posted here had absolutely no idea what it was they would be working on. They didn't even know where they were coming. When they came, it wasn't uncommon for them to be put in the back of a blacked out lorry with no idea where they were going. And when they arrived, they'd be kept in a holding area for further security checks until they were deemed safe to allow into this intense level of secrecy.
A message went through a number of steps in order to be able to yield valuable intelligence. Firstly, it had to be transmitted by radio. It would be encrypted, probably by a version of the famous Enigma machine, and then sent using Morse code or teleprinter code. It was then intercepted by the Y service at various British secret listening stations. WAAF worked in the Y service to intercept enemy messages by radio. They would tune into a frequency to hear a message being transmitted and would copy it down as accurately as they possibly could. This could be difficult because of interference caused by the weather. The contents of the message were then sent to Bletchley, either electronically or by dispatch rider.
A lot of the information coming into Bletchley Park and leaving came via dispatch rider. Lots of women actually took over roles riding dispatch motorcycles, carrying around 3,000 messages per day between intercept stations in the UK. And it wasn't uncommon for them to ride around 1,200 miles per week. They did that in very challenging conditions, all kinds of weather. Nothing stopped them from riding, whether it was snow, ice, rain, even wind. And they did so with the danger of bombing raids. It wasn't uncommon to come across big potholes in the road that had been caused by falling incendiaries and bombs. And often they had to ride in total darkness. They couldn't use the headlamps on their bikes and had to use the light from burning buildings to be able to read their maps. This was very dangerous and difficult work, and they could be riding for 10-12 hours per day, which made them very tired. But it was a critical link in the intelligence flow network.
Once the message was in the possession of codebreakers at Bletchley Park, they would work to decipher and decode it. Once it was in plain text German, it then needed to be translated, and this was often carried out by members of the WAAF or the Wrens. Once in plain English, the message was cross-referenced against other intercepted communications to provide as wide an intelligence picture as possible. Now, in its form as top secret intelligence, or ultra intelligence as it was known, the information could be sent to the relevant people who could make decisions on it. These were politicians and military commanders, and included high-ranking members of the Royal Air Force. It's easy to see how intelligence on the Luftwaffe's intentions and capabilities might be useful to the Allies. It could include things like the number of aircraft and pilots that the Luftwaffe possessed at any given time. It might include the type of aircraft or weaponry being used, where an attack might be due to take place, in what force, and maybe even when.
The WAAF who worked at Bletchley Park to operate teleprinters were known as Teleprincesses, and they constituted a vital link in the intelligence flow to and from Bletchley Park. Later on in the war, they would even send information directly to field commanders from Bletchley. And information coming out of a teleprinter came out on rolls of paper like this one. Sometimes it would come out with 16 feet worth of paper, which earned it the name the toilet roll.
Bletchley could be quite a difficult place to work. The conditions weren't always very pleasant. It could be cold, damp and dark. With the blackout conditions, often it was difficult to see in the hut. And there were reports from some of the people that worked here of how cold it could be, and they kept their coats and their mittens and their scarves on to try and stay warm. And then there's the emotional impact of working here. Some people who understood what it was that they were doing knew that their work meant life and death for other people. There are even reports of some of the women who worked here knowing that relatives or fiancés or husbands were on ships or in areas in great danger, and that their work affected what happened to them. Then there's the emotional impact of not knowing what you were doing here. Sometimes people didn't really know how their work fit into the wider scheme of things, and the extreme compartmentalisation and secrecy meant that they didn't always understand what they were doing, and it could be quite tedious and boring work, so it would be very easy to become demoralised.
Everyone at Bletchley remained hidden for a long, long time. And what happened here is notoriously one of the best kept secrets of the war. When the story did come out, there was one group of people who remained hidden. Working under total secrecy to provide the RAF with a stream of information that would inform its actions and help it to maximise its effectiveness against the enemy. The WAAF at Bletchley are another group of women who have, until now, remained hidden behind the few.